they hold are legendary.
Do you know what it's like to fall down a hill of grenades with a pin pulled? You're about to find out. Fuck were you thinking?
That although Trump was president during the charged conspiracies, his scheme was a fundamentally private one. Smith also laying out new details about Trump's conduct and conversations in the days and hours before his supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Everything is so beautiful. I wanna drop it down low. Everything is so beautiful. I wanna drop it down low. Everything is so beautiful. I wanna drop it down low. Everything is so.
I go by the Duet Ninja. I explain shit.
Let's talk about the Duet Ninja for a second.
And to think I hate. Well, that's very telling. Talking about demographics and the facts based on demographics, i.e. who voted for who in this situation, clearly points to the fact that being divided, being categorized is something that is very real. So clearly, first and foremost, you think I'm dividing the country again. Whew, a whole lot of privilege in that statement. But you think I hate simply because I'm agreeing with a young lady who was talking about the basic breakdown, not only about DEI, but for the fact that Trump was voted in by a certain group of people, overwhelmingly. So what's your problem? Why are you so angry? ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Duet Ninja Dojo. I go by the Duet Ninja. I explain shit. And thank you for checking out the video. Today we're talking about victimhood and survivors in America. Stay tuned. Thanks again for watching. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Duet Ninja Dojo. I go by the Duet Ninja. I'm coming to you live from the state of North Carolina. And, this channel is centered around truth, context, and action. I got established on TikTok about 5 years ago. And as my follower count grew, I decided to come up with this YouTube channel and it offer exclusive content centered primarily around, information and my thought processes when it comes to this information. I'm a former Navy, well, not a former, I'm a Navy veteran, former Navy enlisted individual, petty officer, and, have a degree in psychology. Been in the business world for a little over 10 years now. I was a ninth grade world history teacher for a while too. So this is what I bring to the table. A diverse understanding of the world around me. I had the opportunity to travel half the planet by the time I was 21. I've been across this country. I can communicate with anybody because quite simply, folks, in this day and age, if you're not able to communicate, you're going to be left behind. Especially with what we have now in terms of chatbots and agents when dealing with artificial intelligence and things of that nature. If you haven't been following, the explosion, so to say, when it comes to AI, just know the better you are at describing things through words or through audio, through voice, the better you are, the more likely you are to utilize AI to your advantage going forward. In my respect, it's going to be centered around information and again, organizing thoughts in a way that not transpires, but transforms the mindset of individuals so they can see the world better. Because the better you see the world, the least likely it is that you're going to be taken for granted, or you're going to be taken for a ride, so to say. But yeah, this kind of ties into today's topic, which is about victimhood versus survivor, and how that correlates with people in America, primarily. If you know anything about the history of America, primarily from a numerical standpoint, from a quantitative standpoint, the makeup of this country hinges on, white Americans and black Americans, ultimately. You could say what you want about the numbers of the demographics, but in terms of impact in this country, white Americans, black Americans by far, from overall. So this kind of ties into that existence as Americans. And if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. You'll get a notification when I go live on Fridays. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If work comes up and I can't come on here, which is not going to be the case that much, that's why I chose Fridays at 11. I'll put something out there on YouTube and give you guys a heads up. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Cool. All right, victimhood. What's up, John? How you doing, brother? Victimhood versus survivor in America, and this can transform over to a lot of different scenarios in people's lives. But my approach is always explaining the relationship, the societal relationships, I should say, with Americans, and how, unfortunately, even to this day, that race is somewhat of the fulcrum. All right, it's the wedge on which our relationships balance in this country. So the better you are understanding how that existence plays out, the better you are, or I should say, the more aware you'll be on how you should operate and who you should be moving with in terms of your decision making and things of that nature. All right, so let's blow this bad boy up. Boom. So core distinction between victim and survivor. Now, the words matter, folks. If they didn't matter, we wouldn't use them for laws, right? Words matter. And it's going to be imperative to understand what it means to be a victim and a survivor in this country, okay? And it's not what you think it is. It's not, well, white people bad, black people good, but it's not like that at all, right? I explain shit. That's my core responsibility coming on this platform, to explain shit. Here we go. So, victim, okay, we're going to lay the foundation. Victim refers to someone who has been harmed, oppressed, or subjected to an injustice. Okay, automatically you can see that it's not just black people, but there's more to it, obviously. All right, the term emphasizes that. The term emphasizes what was done to them. And it highlights injury, subjugation, or loss of agency. Being labeled a quote-unquote victim is often tied to systems of power where the person or group had little to no control over the outcome. Okay, again, you can see how this covers a lot of bases when we're talking about people in this country. So survivor, okay, that emphasizes the endurance, resilience, and agency. Right, so obviously you're taking back control over your person, so to say, your existence. A survivor is not only harmed, but also persists despite harm. Okay, the label suggests movement beyond the event or structure that created the harm in the first place. Right, highlighting strength and adaptation rather than subjugation. Again, all right. So let's talk about the racial categories and the victim's survivor lens, right? How you perceive the world around you based on racial categorization, because it has an effect, folks. Being a part of a society, okay, you can't control where you're placed, right? But the society has a profound effect, right? Because that's your environment. It has a profound effect on how you see things. Okay, you're born with a certain set of tools, okay, but the tools that you bring with you, okay, you try to utilize that in your environment, right? You take that to your shop, so to say, to build your vehicle through life, right? But the environment that you're in can only give you certain things that your tools can be used upon. Okay, so the broader the scope of the parts, so to say, for your vehicle that you come across, the better your vehicle will be, the more powerful it will be, the more terrain it can go over. Okay, just something to think about. All right. So racial categories, right? Race as a social construct often forces groups into categories that map directly onto this victim survivor distinction. Okay, so historically oppressed racial groups, and this is obvious, those subjugated to chattel slavery in the U.S., indigenous peoples across the continent, well, across both continents, Asian communities, under exclusionary laws primarily, were positioned as victims in the dominant narrative. Right. So the dominant narrative being what you learn in history class. OK, they endured state violence, systemic exclusion, and cultural erasure. All right. All things that deal with your environment. Right. So you're bringing your tools into an environment, but your environment's restricted. So will your vehicle be able to? OK, so survivor framing. Survivor perception. This emerges when those same groups assert cultural continuity, political resistance, all right, and economic creative growth despite oppression. All right. For example, African Americans preserving cultural identity through music, language, community despite enslavement, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. All right. So survivor is despite of. Okay, and that's a set of parts for your car, so to say, for your vehicle, right? That would not be available if you had the oppressive mindset. You see what I'm saying? So Native peoples reclaiming languages and ceremonies despite systemic attempts at cultural genocide, and it took years for them to get those rights. Oddly enough. Okay, immigrant groups framing their presence as survival in the face of exclusionary immigration policies. You can see it now. Having people come into your country and seen as an invasion is purely political. There's nothing humanitarian about that. That is purely political. So what does that say about the process of freedom and justice for all? What does that say about the symbolism that America is supposed to have? It's a facade. It's a facade. John type, surviving is awareness for prevention. Indeed. All right. So now let's talk about the dominant racial category, or whiteness. Okay. Typically not framed as victims or survivors in collective terms, except when individuals within the category experience personal harm. Okay, you have to be reminded. Whiteness, being historically positioned as the category of power, often avoids the victim-survivor dichotomy on a structural level. Okay, you're the dominant racial category. There is no victim-survivor situation. You're good, right? It's assumed. Okay. Instead, its narrative is about preservation of power or status. Okay. Above all else, being white is right. Okay. But there's a side of society, or the world, I should say, that you don't see. You don't see yourself as being a victim if you have this dominant racial categorization in the back of your mind. And this is why we have so many individuals in this country, right, voting against their best interest. This is why you put people in the Congress, state and federal level, that don't give a damn about raising the basic living wages, right? They don't, because you keep voting people in that make you scared of something that you don't need to fear. You should never fear not being white. This is not the 1800s. If you haven't noticed, ladies and gentlemen, it's more important to be a part of a country than to be a part of a race. And if you haven't came to terms with that yet, you're still immature. This is a video explaining how that immaturity is going to cut off your lifeline and possibly your children's. Okay, Implications for race and society. All right. The language of victim versus survivor can influence policy, social movements, and cultural memory. That memory transforms into perception. Okay. Framing a group as victims may justify reparations or protective measures, but can also reinforce dependency stereotypes. Welfare queen. Oh, black people on welfare. They don't want to work. Right? Framing as quote unquote, survivors builds pride, resilience, and continuity, but may minimize the acknowledgement of ongoing harm. So one needs to ask themselves, what is more likely to happen if one sees themselves as a victim as opposed to a survivor? Would it be more beneficial to see oneself as a victim and reinforce that dominant group's perception and stereotype of them, which will keep them subjugated even further? Or is it more important to be seen as a survivor, okay, and constantly educating people on the ongoing harm, on the ongoing injustices, so people can see for themselves that their lives are in danger? People don't take America seriously. When I say people, I'm talking about Americans. You don't take this seriously. The laws are already in place where you can cut corruption off at the frickin' knees, but you choose not to because the implication for race in this society puts you in a particular position where you have to make choices. And when those choices hinge upon how you feel and not the reality of the situation, you will continue to do what you're doing now. Look around you. Nuremberg trials were a thing, folks. Oh, so within racial justice work, many communities prefer the survivor framing, and I do too. Again, you're trying to put people in a position where they can feel better about themselves, so they can make their environment better. Okay, and here you see in the checked area here, in short, victim highlights the harm inflicted by race-based oppression. Survivor highlights the resilience and continuity of marginalized groups in spite of race-based oppression. This is not a blame game, folks. You're only as strong as your weakest link when you talk about a country. The weakest link in this country, folks, are those who don't want to see race for what it is. And unfortunately, that tends to be far more quote-unquote white people than not. Look at how you vote. All right, so then I continue this conversation with AI, with ChatGPT here, with a question, right? So I asked it to let's dig a little deeper into the white racial category. Okay, since all white people are not equal within that category, are there not victims within that category that allow the subjugation of other races because of that victimization? Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to say. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not beneficial to be white, unless you're in the top 3% of the wealth earners in this country, in this world. It is not beneficial. It used to be beneficial. It's not, and one of the reasons why it's not beneficial because white people don't understand how to deal with being white. You think, and again, this is based on evidence. You think being white puts you into a group, so to say, that is protected, and it's not. It never has been. You've always been given something else to beat down on because you were too afraid to punch up, because you know what's up there. More white people that control your jobs, that control your societal mobility. It is so important to be seen as something within white society. And one of the things that you have to be seen as is an individual that doesn't care for those who are not white. Now, I'm not saying tolerate, because white people have been tolerating shit for a long time. Let's be honest. That's why you have all these nonprofits trying to help people instead of having white people collectively coming into that particular area, that particular society, and fixing it. You wouldn't need nonprofits if you fixed the fucking problem. You wouldn't need nonprofits if you fixed the problem. I'm just saying. Oh, John, you got a question. All right. Would you say America is like a proving ground versus an experiment? Oh, wow. Well, based on how our society is ran, it's definitely a proving ground. The experiment is ongoing, but that experiment requires a proving ground to exist. If you can't prove who you are, and especially this is a capitalist society that we're dealing with here, right? So you need to have the resources, so to say. You have to have that car, you have to have that house, you have to have the clothes, the shoes, right? You have to be seen in certain areas, rolling with certain people, looking a certain way, right? Everything's a proving ground, and that can be a positive and a negative. I mean, you should always try to better yourself. Prove to yourself that you're better than you were yesterday, so to say. And at the same time, the negative, obviously, you're putting yourself into a financial situation just so you can look good, right? Just to be patted on the back. You denigrate others simply because, the example I just mentioned a minute ago. The comfort in being white is knowing that you're not other than, right? It's that comfort that's been around for years, and that's going away. I mean, obviously, you can see again how people vote. That white comfort is leaving, right? People are having to deal with the fact that either you're this, or you're that, right? Which is a great thing, and you kind of touched on something I'm going to bring up here in a second, man. Great question. Okay, let's see here. All right, so here we go. Whiteness as a constructed category, and again, this came from the prompt I just read a second ago. And we're touching on the complexities of hierarchy within whiteness. And that's something people don't want to deal with, right? And that's primarily the wedge that keeps people from coming together and holding the true instigators of our situation in America accountable. Okay, this can be seen going all the way back during Reconstruction. Hell, I mean, you can go back to the abolitionists, right? That was that mindset, right? People were coming together against an authority that was forcing this racial structure to stay in place, right? So the wealthy can maintain wealth, accumulate more wealth. And poor people, poor whites especially, can feel good about themselves because they're not Negroes. They're not other than. Okay, that was very important. And that kind of touches on what we're going to talk about here. Whiteness as a constructed category. So whiteness historically was not a neutral skin color, quote unquote. Historically, it was not a neutral skin color. It was a political, economic, legal designation of belonging to the dominant group. The term race in itself, ladies and gentlemen, comes from the 1560s. Okay, and it has nothing to do with you can search through etymology in terms of the term race. It has nothing to do with people. It's political, it's economic, it's legal. All right, it's the word. Importantly, not all Europeans were initially considered white. And I mean, a lot of people bring this up too. Irish, Italians, Eastern Europeans, Jews, European Jews to be specific, but were at times excluded from whiteness before being absorbed into it, right? And that's the case now. This is why you have people who come from Syria that look like, your typical Eastern European, and they're considered white. Right. it's crazy. It's crazy. They're the wealthy of the wealthiest of the wealthy, the people who could continue to perpetuate this system. And that's also waning, by the way. I mean, with all this information in front of us, folks, you don't have much longer to keep blaming other people for the fact that you're not willing to do the work. That is going away from a societal standpoint. The excuses are leaving because the information is clear. Okay, that's why there's a war of information going on. But importantly, not all Europeans were initially considered white, and went through that. Okay, and that transforms into this inclusion was strategic. Okay, it expanded whiteness as a protective category. All right, protection from what? Providing social privileges to some disadvantaged groups in exchange for aligning with racial hierarchy and against black, indigenous, or other non-white populations. This is why you have people in India looking at, I guess sub-Saharan Africans or African Americans or whatever. They look at these people a certain way. This is why this thought process is reinforced by media across the globe. Univision is a prime example. In fact, a lot of the major media networks in Mexico, going down into obviously South America and whatnot, you don't see dark skinned people on there much, if at all. There's a reason for that. This is a global phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. And it stays in place because people don't want to talk about it, even though talking about it makes us all better. Because again, you're increasing the parts for your vehicle as you move through life, right? Your skill set, hell, the tools that you have expand. They become refined. Okay, you can continue to add parts and pieces to that vehicle to make it more efficient. And eventually you'll be strong enough where you can tow. You can bring people with you. Victimization within whiteness. This is something that, by God, folks, would you please deal with this? Just because you're white doesn't mean they give a F about you. That has never been the case. This is why white people must punch down. Because if you're punching up, you're punching yourself. That's the way the game board has been laid out. Okay? Victimization within whiteness. Class stratification. Poor and working class whites often experience exploitation. You still do. Harsh labor. You still do. And political disenfranchisement, which is why you fall in line. It is easy to manipulate people like that because they think everything else outside of white is bad. You're more likely, this is why white people are more likely to trust people with information that look like them. And black people do that because they know that historically white people haven't had their best interests at heart. One is reactionary, one is planned. It's different. Okay? Class stratification, right? We talked about that. There were victims of economic systems, tenant farming, sharecropping, industrial labor abuses. Okay, this happens to white people all the time, and you still vote against your best interests. Gender dynamics. All right, so the white women now you're talking about DEIA. Now you're talking about what came before that. I forget the term, but yeah. So I mean, DEIA has been hammered in my head. Over the past few years, but white women though racially privileged, sorry, I'm getting excited, were historically limited by patriarchal structures, and they still are. Still don't make the same amount of money. They sometimes gain access to greater rights or protections by aligning with racial hierarchy against people of color. Okay, the women's suffrage movement. Now that was basically for white women. Black women were never thrown into the fray until the civil rights movement. Directly, that is. They've always been there for black men who have fought the good fight always. But I mean, black women are based on everybody else. Black women are new to the fight based on everybody else. And again, we're talking about the two major racial categories in this country from the history of. Right, black women have not been in the fray that long, and you see the dynamics change when they got in. So much had to be introduced. The crack epidemic in the 80s, the heroin epidemic in the 70s. 3 strikes, you're out. All these things. I mean, and they're barely a decade apart. I'm talking about the whole drug, Nixon going to Reagan and Clinton, and over the past I'd say 40 years, black women have kind of forced the hand of the United States government, state and federal, right? Because they've been a support system from day one. And white women say they are accomplices and allies and things of that nature, but if you're not willing to hold your family accountable, that's just fluff. Okay. Ethnic religious exclusions, right? Certain European immigrant groups face discrimination based on language, culture, or religion. Over time, these groups were invited into whiteness to shore up racial solidarity at the expense of racial others. There's a friend of ours, actually. So I used to be a certified trainer, and I was working with her. Her daughter was a distance runner, and they had actually her school was right down the street from her house, and her and her mom and dad would come out there, and her mom works with my wife. She's a doctor. Actually, her and her husband are doctors. But he used to play soccer, or football, back in the day at a decently high level back in Europe. I want to say Poland, maybe. I could be wrong. Belgium. Anyway, moral of the story is that young lady's mom, the doctor, she has a very strong European accent, and we're in North Carolina, right? And when she deals with a patient, a lot of the times, especially right now, they coming at her sideways, Jack. I mean, they get somebody who can talk, who can speak American, that type of thing. She deals with that every freaking day. Talking about the young lady's mom. So this is a prime example, right? But she look. If she didn't talk, you think she just your regular old Joe Schmo, typical white woman in America, but nah, very strong accent. Good people. Anyway, so how victimization within whiteness reinforced subjugation of others. Okay, again, this is something that people don't want to deal with, and that's unfortunate, but you're going to have to. You're going to have to, right? Oh, what's good, Barb? How you doing? People are cruel. They are. They're gonna wish they didn't take that route, because we're not playing games around here. I know you're not playing games on your channel neither, folks. Yeah. If you're not checking out Barb, please check her out on TikTok, and now I believe YouTube as well. Yeah. So the things I don't want to deal with, Barb. Victimization within whiteness, reinforced subjugation of others, and we're going to tell you how. All right. Instead of dismantling the systems, here's a paradox coming from ChatGPT. This is funny. Here's the paradox. Instead of dismantling the systems that harm them, many disadvantaged whites were offered relative privilege, legal, social, political, over non-whites. We see this now, folks. Why is Trump not in jail? Don't say he was president, because he wasn't. Why is he not? Why do police officers get off a lot of the times? Why do we have to have rallies and marches and all this other shit just to get justice in this country? Why is that? because they want to make sure that you don't see the BS that is actually coming downhill, not uphill. They don't want you to see the fact that you are being duped. You are victims. And you're comfortable being one because they give this facade of, legal, social, and political power. Well, no, you're just a part of a cult. This created this created what W.E.B. Du Bois is called the psychological wage of whiteness. Yes. Psychological wage of whiteness, a sense of superiority granted to poor whites, even if materially they were exploited. At least I'm not black. That's why they think calling somebody a black MF or whatever, this, that, and the third is some type of slight. I ain't got no problem being black. You do. I got zero problems because I know who I am. I know why I'm here. This is why you won't see a white person coming on here talking about this in this manner, because they don't have that experience. I have a lot more vested in this country than a white person does. And that's not just because of my military background. When you're a survivor and you're willing to go back in the burning house and save others, best believe we got a lot more vested in this country than you do. Best believe. That's real. Thanks, Barb. So, some examples for you. Chattel slavery era. Poor whites had little economic power, very little. They didn't even have schools for a lot of you folks. But laws ensured they were above enslaved Africans and enslaved indigenous individuals, socially and legally. You can just murder somebody if they were black and make up a story about it. See how that still happens today? Yeah. Nothing that's going on today in terms of societal relationships is new. It's just being exposed. It's not new. Well, it's not new to us anyway. Industrialization, right? Industrialization period. White ethnic immigrants competed with black laborers, all right? But solidarity was undermined by racial divisions reinforced by employers. This is why Italians and Irish, all these other peoples were brought into the whole whiteness thing and became police officers. Turned your back on those who your grandparents were cool with because they were trying to survive. It blows my mind that one of the I believe the largest lynchings in America down in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken, was imposed on Italians apparently. But then you have Italians in this country that are some of the most racist people you'll come across. Because their position in this country is more important than the country itself. Jim Crow South. Poor whites remain victims of poverty, yet maintain a social quote-unquote advantage through segregation laws. They can get away with shit that black people could not. And this is a great time to remind you folks, that prior to the mid-1950s ish, there were far more whites in the prison systems in this country than black folks. You can go do the math yourself. Okay, when black folks were getting arrested during Reconstruction and all this other crap, they weren't taken to the jails per se. They were put on plantations. They didn't even offer black folks prison. They knew where to put you. Jim Crow South. Okay, thus the victimization of some whites function as a tool to maintain racial hierarchy. Any questions? Okay. Contemporary reflections, we'll pass that up. So in short, yes, there are victims within the white racial category. Their victimization, often class or gender based, has historically been manipulated to reinforce racial subjugation of others. The quote unquote reward of belonging to whiteness, even in a diminished form, made it possible for structures of a racial hierarchy to persist. And you introduce media, especially digital media of today, well, that really reinforces it. That's why you have people coming on here, getting a podcast on and, jumping in front of a microphone and just saying outlandish shit. Because that mindset of, I can say whatever I want to say because I'm white is so entrenched in a lot of these people that they don't see the repercussions coming. We've been itching at this chance. Itching. And I know a lot of our parents were itching too. My dad was born in the late 30s. My mom was born in the early 40s. My mom was a lot more reserved. Well, that's because my dad didn't play games. He was an intellectual. He knew. They were putting books in front of my face at a very early age. He knew. They gave me a first, middle, and last Christian name. They knew. They knew what was coming. So yeah. And this diagram here you see on your left, right? And again, it's just a breakdown, right? So you have economic exploitation for the privileged whites, right? Elites, full benefits. And then you have victims within whiteness, with the poor, ethnic outsiders, patriarchy affected women, but they had social privileges, and with those two together. And other groups here you see in the red, racialized other groups, black, indigenous, immigrant, however you want to call it. This is how it stays in place. You have the ones on the left, more than likely they are descendants of those who put this whole thing in motion. Definitely descendants of those who benefited from it economically, because it's all about money. This is a capitalist society. And you have to play the games, folks. Well, you used to have to play the games. Right on. All right. So, that concludes today's lesson. Shout out to John and Barb for coming in here, man. You guys made my day. I appreciate y'all. And if you have any comments or anything like that, put it in the comment section. I can bring them up next week. And again, the Dojo Live happens every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you can make it, great. If you can't, I understand. These will be posted to my my YouTube channel regardless. So, appreciate you guys. By all means, be safe out there. If you see any music festivals, go jump on in there and and have a great time, quote unquote. But yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, please do, Barb. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you, honey. And there's quite a few videos also, but yeah, go check this out by all means. Enjoy yourself. And next week, let's see, I'm not quite sure. Well, chime in next week and you'll see what happens. Yeah. Well, you'll see what happens. But yeah, enjoy your Labor Day weekend, y'all. Be safe out there, please. We have a lot to do. We still have a lot of fighting to do. All right. And it's all going to be informational. Dig it. Appreciate y'all. And by all means, don't give up. Hi, I go by the Duet Ninja. I explain shit. I want to talk to you about something. And this goes in line with these ridiculous individuals, especially on the Republican side, that constantly talk about debt, constantly talking about running this country like a business, and not understanding what it takes to be a leader of a business, especially one that goes above and beyond their contribution to the community, because they realize the community is the only reason why they exist. You see, ladies and gentlemen, you can't run a government like a business, especially when we're talking about a democratic society based on a republic. You cannot run a fucking country like a business. And it just bugs the hell out of me that this country, especially, people are saying this when on the flip side, the way businesses have ran in this country, those who ran a lot of the businesses in this country have been doing things unethically. You can clearly see that by the wages in this country. You see, ladies and gentlemen, ethical leadership is why Musk,
Trump, majority of Congress people who are getting these monies, dark money, things you can't trace, especially now. This is why everyday Americans are having a hard time with any fucking thing, because ethical leadership has never been at the center of voting people into office that wield power.